Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. So we have three wide releases last weekend and they are Ford vs Ferrari, Charlie's Angel, and The Good Liar. Let's see how those movies did at the box office. Alright, let's jump right in. So coming in number one is surprisingly, at least to me, is Ford vs Ferrari. It is the racing movie starring Matt Damon and Christian Bale about, like employees at Ford who were, Ford basically were losing the races against the Ferrari company, and Ferrari, they make race cars, and Ferrari just like trash talk Ford and the company, and the higher ups commissioned Matt Damon, and he brought on his friend Christian Bale, played by Christian Bale, to win the race for them at the Le Mans, right? This movie is well reviewed at 92% on the tomato meter, and I said this movie could probably open somewhere in the 20 to 25 million range, but it did way better than my projections, right? It pulled in 31 million in its opening weekend, so it's actually doing pretty well. I thought people might not be that interested in this period racing movie, but again, there you go. I guess it's mainly because of the other movies that was that were released in theaters, which we'll get to. So 31 million opening for a movie that cost 100 million to make is okay, but we'll see how it does in its second weekend. And overseas, it pulled in an additional 21.4 million for a worldwide total about 52 million. All right, let's move on to number two, which is last week's top movie. It's Midway. It's the Lionsgate World War II movie. In the second weekend, it pulled in about 8.8 million for a domestic total of 35 million. And let's see how it did overseas. Overseas, it pulled in an additional 18.6 million for a worldwide total of 53 million. So, you can expect this type of movie, a World War II movie, to play better here than overseas. Like I said, this is a war movie between the US and Japan, and I guess it's it would play better here and maybe even Japan than elsewhere. So this one is directed by Roland Emmerich, and reviews wise it's not that great, at 42% last I checked on the tomato meter, but hey, it was a cinema score, so I guess it appeals to those the target audience. And in the second weekend, Midway opened to about 18 million, so drop off is 50 plus percent, but we kind of expected that with this type of movie that it just released to take advantage of Veterans Day. Alright, number three is the other new release last weekend, and that is the Charlie's Angels reboot. This is a movie that I thought would do better than it actually did. I said this movie could probably open somewhere in the 25 to 30 million range because, based on the previous live action Charlie Angels movies, the first Charlie Angels movie back in 2000 opened to 40 million, then its sequel, Full Throttle, opened to 37, and I thought, hey, this one, from the trailer, it looks, pretty decent, but I also said that I hated those other two movies, and this one looks better than the previous two, and I said, people are there is a market for these female-led action movies, and if the previous two movies are anything to judge by, it could open to somewhere in the 25 to 30 million range, but Charlie Angels opened only to 8.6 million, so it pretty much bombed. But the budget is only about 48 million, but still an opening of only 8.6 million. And reviews for Charlie Angels is not that bad. I mean, 57 on the tomato meter. Cinema score is a B plus, so kind of average right there. But I guess more concerning is that the audience that I thought would turn out for this movie didn't, and I guess the only reason that this movie didn't do as well as it did is that the brand maybe it's not that strong, and that Kristen Stewart, Naomi Scott, and Ella Balinska are not that huge of a draw, especially Kristen Stewart. She was huge in the Twilight movies, and then there she had this movie with Chris Hemsworth, The Huntsman, right? Or Snow White and the Huntsman. Yeah, Snow White and the Huntsman, which did really well. But then I guess her star power hasn't risen since then, or actually it diminished, right? Okay, let's see how it did overseas. Overseas, it put in 19.3 million for a worldwide total of 27 million. So it looks like this is one of these movies where, you know, it'll do better overseas than domestically. All right, number 4 is the babysitting comedy Playing with Fire, which stars John Cena as a firefighter who has to, you know, babysit some children of various ages. And in its second weekend, it pulled in about 8.6 million for a domestic total about 25 million. And let's see, overseas it pulled in an additional 4.5 million for a worldwide total about 30 million. So yeah, this is one of these movies where, you know, wrestlers, you know, previous action stars would usually do to soften the images to play to the family crowd. And, you know, this is John Cena's entry into this genre. Reviews wise, it's not that great. I mean, 23% on the tomato meter and a B+ cinema score. All right, number 5 is the romantic comedy Last Christmas. Stars Emilia Clarke and Henry Golding. Michelle Yeoh and Emma Thompson is in here as well. Let's see, in the second weekend, Last Christmas pulled in about 6.7 million for a domestic total of 22 million. Let's see how it did overseas. Overseas, it put it in 13 million for a worldwide total of about 36 million. All right, moving along to number 6 is the Shining sequel, Dr. Sleep. And in second weekend, it put in about 6.2 million for a domestic total of 25 million. It's a sequel to the well-regarded cult movie, and in this one, the sequel, Ewan McGregor played the grown-up Danny Torrance. He his character, remember, like, has to escape his father from this hotel in The Shining. And this one's directed by Mike Flanagan, who did Ouija, Origin of Evil, so there's some horror cred there. But my concern with this movie, when I previewed it, was anyone asking for a Dr. Sleep sequel? And the answer is definitely no, right? So this movie, it's just not doing as well. It bombed. I say this movie could probably open somewhere in the 10 to 15 million range, and and it did right there, about 14 million open. And it's in the second weekend, dropped off more than 50%. As with horror movies, you expect these 50+% drop offs. And as with Last Christmas, is one of these movies that it's going to continue dropping, and it's not going to pick up any steam or any legs in theaters this holiday season. Let's see how Dr. Sleep did overseas. Overseas, they put in about 29 million for a worldwide total of 53 million. All right, let's move on to number 7, which is one of the other new release last weekend, and it is The Good Liar. It pulled in about 5.7 million in its opening weekend. This is a movie that stars Helen Mirren and Ian McKellen, and directed by Bill Condon. McKellen stars as this grifter, right, who wants to con a recent widow, played by Mirren, out of her millions. And there's all these twists and turns involved. It's basically an excuse for Mirren and McKellen to be in a movie together. Two master actors. Reviews wise, is not that great. 63% on the tomato meter. It opened to about 5.7 million, but it's holding steady. This movie is holding steady. Another 5.7 million in its second weekend. So even though it didn't open well, it looks like it was one of these movies that would attract theater goers who are fans of Mirren and McKellen, and the older crowd, right? Reviews wise, it's not that great. It's 63% on the tomato meter, but for something like this, you want you want it better reviewed, and in a 80+ percentage range, right? But it's doing as well as you expect, right? Even though it didn't open that high, it's holding steady, and that's the best thing you want the movie to do, right? A good opening is okay, but as long as it goes steady. As with Helen Mirren films, right? Helen Mirren is a bankable actress, right? Her movies usually just stay in theaters, linger in theaters, and as it didn't open well, right? Didn't open high, but you take your eyes off it, and then you look at it again, it somehow end up in the had domestic gross in the 50 million range or so, 35 to 50 million. That's her movie, that's her genre. So Helen Mirren, you can bank on her. All right, number 8 is The Joker. In its 7th weekend, it pulled in about 5.7 million for a domestic total of 322 million. And let's see how it did overseas. Overseas, it pulled in 694 million for a worldwide gross of 1 billion. So this movie crossed the 1 billion mark, and it did it without China, and it became the highest grossing R-rated movie ever. And it's probably the most profitable R-rated movie ever as well, right? This movie only cost about 55 million, and it grossed 1 billion worldwide. All right, number 9 is Maleficent, Mistress of Evil. In its 5th weekend, it pulled in about 5.2 million for a domestic total of 106 million. And let's see, overseas, it pulled in 352 million for a worldwide total of 458 million. Mistress of Evil cost 185 million to make, and although it didn't do that well here, it did well overseas for a worldwide total of 458 million. So it already made its money back. It already broke even. But I'm not sure if they're gonna make Maleficent 3. You can see that in the domestic gross is trending downwards, and I think its worldwide gross is trending downwards as well. So they're probably gonna hold off on a Maleficent 3 unless did really well on home video. All right, let's close out the top 10 with Harriet. This movie is a biopic about Harriet Tubman, right? In its 3rd weekend, it pulled in about 4.18 million for a domestic gross of about 32 million. And let's see. And this movie might not get an overseas release, since this is more of an American tale, and not many countries know about the history of American history, right? Let's see. This is a movie that I think could probably open to about 3 million, right? It opened way better. It opened to about 12 million. All right, that's it for the box office top 10. Let's move on to the new releases this weekend, and the biggest of which is probably Frozen 2, the sequel to the 2013 Disney animation. Yeah, that's that long ago, 6 years ago. And then the Mr. Roger biopic, A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, and the action thriller 21 Bridges, starring Chadwick Boseman. So let's start off with Frozen 2. This is a sequel to the 2013 animation movie, song, dance number, animation about this pair of sisters who go through thick and thin for each other. Reviews wise, right now the Frozen 2 is 82% on the tomato meter, at Rotten Tomatoes. The first movie had a 90% on the tomato meter, so you can see that reviews wise it dipped somewhat, but it's not probably going to do anything to the box office, right? So Frozen is a new IP from Disney. It opened to I think 67 million 3 days. They did some special preview screenings, but for a 3-day weekend it only pulled in about 67 million. But if you add those together, the previews from the previous days were probably somewhere in the 80 or 70 80 million range or so, somewhere around there. Okay, and in North America it pulled in about 400 million, and worldwide 1.2 billion. So it's really a really successful animation, a new IP from Disney, right? And here we are 6 years later, the sequel. It seems like just yesterday. So for the sequel, the first Frozen did really well. It's probably gonna bring the fans of the first movie back. This is a new adventure for the pair of sisters. After a number of years, Frozen now is becoming a known quantity, right? You see the dolls and toys and whatever, merchandise everywhere. And I think, it has an expanded audience, due to home video viewing, etc., right? So, the first movie opened to about, 67 million for 3 days. I think the sequel is probably going to do better, going to open better. So, I think it's going to probably have an opening somewhere in the 95 million range, despite the reviews being lower, since, people know about the Frozen franchise right now. All right, let's move on to A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. Tom Hanks stars as Mr. Rogers. A reporter in this movie, a reporter is interviewing him for a profile. Yeah, and this is one of these uplifting movies for the holidays, right? So as a comparison, right, Tom Hanks also did Disney movie, a Disney biopic way back when, called in 2013 as well, titled Saving Mr. Banks. He played, Disney, who is, trying to, I believe, one of these Mary Poppins, the author of Mary Poppins, trying to get her to, have him, do the movie about Mary Poppins. Anyway, it had a 10 million opening, went on to make 83 million domestically and 118 million worldwide. I expect this movie to perform similar to Saving Mr. Banks, so an opening of somewhere in the 10 million range for A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. Reviews are good at this moment, 96% on the tomato meter, but is this one of these movies where it attracts a large audience? I guess not. I don't think so. It's just kind of like Saving Mr. Banks, which it will earn its money over time. It's not one of these movies which opens high. All right, finally we have 21 Bridges, an action movie starring Chadwick Boseman as a NYPD detective who is on the hunt for some criminals who killed 8 cops during their robbery, and his father was killed way back when, and so he has this thing against cop killers, right? So this is this movie. Reviews wise, not that great at this time, 40% on the tomato meter. It's one of those genre films. Boseman, as plays Black Panther, but he was on the radar. It was radar playing Jackie Robinson in 42, in the movie 42. So one of those genre movies, like I said, is targeted toward the action crowd, the African American crowd. As such, it's probably going to open somewhere in the 15 to 20 million range this weekend. All right, so that's it for this week's podcast. Until next time, take care. Bye bye.